In this video, we're going to discuss the Olmec civilization of South America, domes of Chicago, and the Civil War. Welcome. This was originally going to be an opening segment, but I think there's just a little more to say. In one of my last videos, I talked about how the African American may just be an American, native to the land, and I got a lot of backlash for it. But nevertheless, is it that crazy? If we look at pictures of the Civil War, and even in the photographs, the destruction seems to be much older, and the disaster seeming to have taken place in a time before those pictures were taken. How long before, I don't know, but not looking like fresh cannonball ruins, looking like some massive frequency swept through the realm and reduced everything to rubble. And naturally this brought me to the African American. And it's not so shocking to speak of the black man being in the Americas, for we see this long ago in South America, and not too deep south. Rather, in the northern part, we see the remains of what history has coined the Olmec civilization. And we see these massive heads, and not only massive heads, but pretty futuristic, wearing some sort of helmet with various types of apparatus. And what we see is that these statues depict what we would call a modern-day African. And absolutely mind-blowing, for they tell us these people existed in 1500 BC to 400 BC. Very early time period, one of the greatest advanced remains of pre-Columbian art. And so here you go. And this knowledge is not even hidden. This is accepted, yet not pieced together in the bigger picture. And I think this is great evidence to what we often speak of, a one-world people consisting of multiple races, acting as one, living in harmony, and very advanced. And even here in the mainstream, at the first glance, we get a statue resembling an African origin people, and as we scroll down and continue to look at their art, it begins to look very oriental, as we can see here, and also depicted here. Here we see jade face masks, again in 1500 BC, and what we can see is what clearly looks like another people, clearly more Asian. Same area attributed to the same people. So just this Olmec civilization alone tells us more about ancient America than anything else. Already we see two people that are not supposed to have originated in the Americas. And as always, our mainstream depicting people of the past as primitive and savage, a bloodletting and sacrificing population. I think that this is just offered up in case we get any ideas about how advanced all of this is, especially in this early time period, supposedly before Christ. And this realization has existed amongst the African American community for some time. In this next part, I thought we'd look at a little place I found in Chicago on accident and compare some similarities to the Holy Land. And here we are at the Adler Planetarium and Astronomical Museum, Grant Park, Chicago. And clearly an old photograph and an old building and artificial island, clearly very sharp right angles, and pretty much looking abandoned in this early time period. Not too early. We do see vehicles, and perhaps they're going to have a meeting about what to do with this building. And we can see here they turned it into a planetarium and astronomical museum. but I have seen a twin of this building. I'm not sure where I saved this photo from. I've had it for months, and while looking for other photos, I keep passing by it. And when I first had my epiphany about it, I was still reluctant. Just this one building and my realization that it had a twin. Still, I felt it would just be a small segment. But tonight, or this morning, at 2:24 a.m., I'm inspired to share this. And I feel it's actually very important. But first, I just wanted to have a quick little look at this planetarium in modern times. And here she is, still standing. Excellent. And this planetarium is a public museum dedicated to the study of astronomy and other nonsense. It was founded in 1930 by a Chicago businessman, Max Adler. It was the first planetarium in the US and includes an aquarium and a field museum. Clearly all old world buildings repurposed. The planetarium opened May 12th of 1930, and of course some talk of an architect and no talk of the construction. As usual, who cares about the architect if you're not going to talk about the builder? And it looks like all they've added is some stupid sculptures, as we can see here. Not impressed. And really fascinating. Originally, it looks like they wanted to turn the Museum of Science and Industry from the World's Fair into the planetarium. And we can see that here. But we're told they were struggling to manage the many required renovations of this building, so they decided to just look for another spot. Very telling. Struggling to renovate, so they just decided to build another building. Or as we know, they decided to look for another building suitable to perpetuate their falsities, in this case, a planetarium. So here we go, the backstory, and this looks like it was built 100 years before this picture. And you can see there's been very little foot traffic, just a couple small pathways right here, one here and one here. Pathways created by light foot traffic. Certainly no recent construction has taken place in this photo. And we have an observatory outside of Los Angeles that I've shown in a past video. That is clearly an old world building, and I think that became a good cover-up for these dome-type buildings. Now, if we were in the Middle East, we could convert this into a mosque. But here in America, these have become observatories. And back to my point. What is this building the spitting image of? A very famous building in the Middle East. And let me just show you that building. Here we go. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, said to have been built at the former site of King Solomon's Temple, a very touristy site, a building that I've always thought was rather top-heavy. And here we find a very similar building in Chicago, seeming to have been modernized or stripped of its former glory. And when I saw this picture from times of past, this is exactly what it brought me to. The same style from the old world. And are they both top-heavy? Is the bulk majority of these two buildings underground? Here, what we would call the border of the island may simply be the top of a massive wall. And I think that's exactly what's going on. North America was clearly flooded in ways that many parts of the realm were not. And when we look here in Jerusalem, we see that there was a massive building, and that this is actually merely the top, and this being the remains, the ruins. And we can get another feel for that in this image. Here, this great wall, as it's called the Wailing Wall, is just the remains of this massive building of the old world, this impossible building. And this wall has been rebuilt over and over, similar to what we see in Baalbek, just throwing columns in here and very impressive, even as a rebuild. And we can only imagine what everything looked like in its original glory. So let me know what you think. Are we looking at the same type of building here? Jerusalem to Chicago. And this really lends to the idea that the old world, the builders of all these buildings, were one people, and perhaps consisting of many races, yet acting as one people. And I think with the stories that we're given are all partial truths, oftentimes completely backwards. But in my opinion, this is a smoking gun. Let me know what you think. Is this the same model as the King Solomon's Temple or the Dome of the Rock found here in Chicago? In my opinion, yes. And here I want to try to disprove the narrative in 5 minutes while looking at 3 cities. First, I want to start out with Charleston and Richmond, Virginia, and all the cities that were affected by the so-called war in America over 100 years ago. This, we're told, is the ruins and remains of a war that was fought with cannonballs, and the cannon and its ball do not create explosions of fire. It's just a ball, and this is what we get for ruins. So many things to consider. For instance, the glory and amazing architecture for this very early time period in America. First out of place part of the narrative. Second out of place part is these ruins. This place looks like a sophisticated bomb has gone off. Not a place that was affected by cannonballs. A highly advanced city of the old world in ruins, and this alone lends to the idea that there was no civil war. However, there was a serious reset, and some people at the very beginning took advantage of this situation, and this myth has perpetuated for all this time. Again, I ask you, is this the remains of cannonball fire? I don't think they could have produced enough cannonballs or gunpowder to amass this kind of destruction. Now let's just move on to another example. Here we have Hiroshima, and what kind of force levels buildings and leaves unburnt tree stumps. And here we can see the remains of a palace, the Palace of Fine Arts, very similar to what we saw in San Francisco, and very similar to what we were just looking at with the Civil War ruins. Exactly. Same type of brick architecture and the same devastation. And this, we're told, is the result of a bomb. Already a better explanation than the one we get in the Civil War. Same result, but in this much earlier narrative, we're told this is the byproduct of these cannonballs. Same result. And now we can jump over to San Francisco. Here we can see both old and modern pictures of ruins. Same style, what we would call the Greco-Roman brick with a cement facade architecture, left in the exact same condition. And we can see that here. Exactly what we saw in both architecture and damage in both Hiroshima and Virginia. All different time periods, same result. This, we're told, is the doing of a great earthquake and fire. So cannonball, earthquake, and bomb, all rendering these cities in the same condition. And the Civil War one being the oldest in this narrative and the most ridiculous. But I think what we're seeing is all the same story. Same civilization, all wiped out in the last reset, and 3 ridiculous narratives given to why these cities are left in this condition. But that's it for today. I thank you so much for joining me, and do have a blessed day please like, comment, and subscribe. As a bonus, I wanted to apologize for being so busy lately, not having time to reply to comments as much as I'd like to. I've been working on my addition, and I hope to move in by this winter. Very exciting, kind of laying things out, finishing up my electrical work, and I recently got a new water line put in. As many of you know, my water froze last winter, so I've pretty much been without water at home since then. So very exciting. Things to come will be insulation and sheetrock and finally putting the fixtures in.